All right, hello everyone, it's Will. I hope you're making progress on this Interface 103 course, and today we're going to take a look at a very specific use case and something that you've been working on, which is adding a new goal. And so here, this is our finished interface here. We're going to be creating this whole action and interface, and you'll see that we're going to be using and leveraging something that is super useful, which is going to be a pattern that we've already used for the navigation, but this time we're going to be using it for a form. So let me show you kind of what it looks like as a finished product. We want to have like this button here, which allows us to create a new goal. And there's a couple of things here. We can see that there is a kind of step-by-step approach here. So let's say, I want to save for a laptop here. So I'm going to do this, and then I can actually change the target amount. So that would be, I don't know, $1,500, for example. And of course, at this stage, I would not be able to put something negative. I would have to put some validations as well. So we're going to be working on those validations as well. You want to make sure that the data is correct when your users are entering them, right? So start date, let's say I started actually already, or let's say I actually started in the future. And the target date, I want to say that, of course, going to be a bit later than this. We're going to make it be like something like this. So we got about, 2 months to save, or actually let's make it even longer here. Cool. And so here I'm going to be able to continue, and let's say I've already saved some money, so I'll put $200 here, and then I have a confirmation saying, hey, this is what you have. So name, your target amount, balance, and then I can continue. So that would be kind of the logic here to be able to have that progression of a form. Cool. So let's go back into and actually create. And so what we're going to be doing is actually start to create a record action. So we're going to go into my designer here. I'm going to open up the goal record type because we want it to be a goal record action. We're going to leverage a lot of the auto generation that we have available here. So I'm going to use this add actions to your record. I'm going to use generate a record action, which will be great. It's going to be a create action here. And so I'm going to click on next. It's going to say this is a new goal. You can leave this as it is. You can change, of course, the description and the name if you want to, but here we're going to skip to actually creating it. And now it tells me that it's going to create a couple of objects here. So namely an interface, a process model, and then a display name expression rule. We're just going to take care of the interface here. So, we're going to let it generate the whole thing, and then we'll be able to go back and actually create and make sure that we have we change the interface. So let's just have it make its thing, and then we're going to save the changes. I'm going to close here, save the changes here. I can actually close this. And so now, if I refresh my list of objects, I'm going to have, of course, my record type changed, but especially I want to look at this interface. So I'm going to go into this interface, and I'm going to open up the plan for this thing here that we have listed out. So here I've got a list of subtasks that I want to go through, and we're going to go ahead and actually do that. So let's look at this. So generate a new goal action from the goal record types. That's done. And then we're going to go into the interface, so inside the interface. So now here, what I'll be doing is I can take a look at this. Let me put some more space here. I can take a look at here the actual thing that was created. We're going to basically remove everything that is inside of this form. That does the job, right? But we want to have something that is more progressive. So I'm going to go into the expression mode. And basically, I'm going to remove everything that is inside of the form layout. So if I simplify things, if I look at what has been created here, really what we have is we have a form layout with a label and then buttons, and then inside here are the contents. So here I'm basically just going to remove everything from the contents. So that means just the columns layout here. So I'm still keeping, by the way, the curly brackets because they're important because I'll be able to actually drag and drop patterns inside of it. I'm going to go into my design mode again because I want to drag and drop a pattern here. So I'm going to go into the patterns. And I'm going to select, let's see where it is. I think it's called form steps. There we go. Just drag and drop this here. Cool. So right now what we have is we have some sort of form steps, but this is about flight detail. So it's not exactly what we want. But at least there is something there that we're going to be able to actually change. So I'm going to go back into my subtasks here, and we've done this. So expression mode, remove the contents of the form layouts, and then drag and drop from the patterns palette to the form steps into the contents of the form. Cool. So now we're going to be able to actually change into expression mode. We're going to be able to change to have the 5 different steps here. So let's see what those steps need to be called. I'm going to go back into my list. So what's the name of the goal? How much do you want to save? When should it start? And when should it end? Do you already have money saved? Confirmation. So I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to call this name of the goal. And so here we're going to have the target, I believe, amounts, target amounts. Those should be the dates. Those should be the balance, and then confirmation. And we can change this, of course, as we go through. We'll be able to actually change what it looks like and make it closer to what we have here as a target here of our form layouts. Cool. So now I can change actually the current form steps. So you see the way it works here is that there is local variables which has the names of the steps. And then we have a current form step that stores the value of when is that step. And here it's initialized at 3. So that's fine, but we want to actually start at 1, right? We want to start with the first things. And here then we have a for each that actually iterates through and actually creates my form steps, the actual kind of content of it through the form steps. So the way it works is that if you go in here, you'll see that there is a bunch of stuff around like the stamps, which is fine, but we actually don't want to look at this specifically. What we want to look at is here, the comments. And in patterns, usually there's a lot of comments saying, hey, if you want to change this, you should change it here. So here, this is replace this rich text with the component or rule that should populate this step. So this will be the first one, and the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. So if we click here, if we test it, so if we go ahead and test the interface, I can see here that I've got name of the goal, target amount, dates, balance, confirmation. So we have the structure here that we want to use. So here, that's the change of the local form steps. And then we'll be modifying the step 1. So the first thing here is going to be to put the name of the goal, which will be a text field, and we'll make it required. So that's cool. We're going to go ahead and go into the contents of the first step. So here, this will be, instead of having a rich text display field, we're going to remove this to be just a text field. And we're going to call this name. And then we're going to have the actual value be mapped to the RBang record.fields.name. And same thing for the save into. We want to actually map it to the save into. Cool. So already now we should be able to actually store and have the name populates and store in the name here. But we want to make sure that it's required, right? Because like right now, if I click on here, I could actually go back and I can actually go ahead without the name of the goal, which is not okay, right? So we want to make it required and be true. Cool. So that's good. Now if I try to click on continue, it actually goes through. That's a problem here because what we want to make sure of is that this required by default only applies to buttons that validate. So what we want to make sure of is that there is a validation group that works with the field here. So validation group is basically mapping a button to an actual field. So here what we'll be doing is actually add here a validation group, and we can call this continue. This is just the key of the validation group, and this will be just a string here. And that I'll have to put this as well. So I'm going to copy this in the button of continue. So if I want to look for it, I can actually look for continue, and there we go. I've got the button widget here. And so what we have to do is just add the validation group here to be continue. So here, if we click on it, it doesn't go through because it doesn't validate it. So actually, I need to make sure that it validates. So I'm going to put here the validates to be true. So I just need to force it to the button to say, yes, you need to validate information. You're not just a button that does things. You actually make sure that you validate. This is the same logic that there is on the submit buttons on forms. That way you actually are sure that it submits the data. So here, if I click on it, value is required. So I can actually put the laptop here and that will be okay. Cool. So that's step one, essentially, text field required with validation group and bound to the button continue, which is what we've done here. Now, step two, this will be a floating point field because we have a target amount. So let's look for step two, and that is the one here. So step two, so it actually just goes, one by one. So if I actually comment here, step one, and I'm going to collapse this, that's step one done. Now we're going to be able to go through and do step two. Nice. Okay, so now we'll actually go into a floating point field, which corresponds to decimal. Floating point, just means decimal essentially here. And so here we're going to have target amount and value will be mapped to target amount as well as save into. Of course, I want to make sure that there is a required, so I'm going to put this as required, and validation group will be continue. Nice. So I can't just go ahead and I continue. I need to have a value. And feel free to actually customize your required message. So you can say target amounts must be positive. So if I click on here, this tells me here target amount must be positive. So it must be none, null, and positive. But the thing here is that I can still put something like either a 0, that would be okay, or even something negative, like -1, which is not okay. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go into validation. I'm going to add a validations. And essentially here, I just need to validate on one thing. So I don't need to do multiple different validations. So what I'll do here is do an if, and I'll make sure that the record dot, where is it? Target amount is more than 0. So it's not just 0 or more. It needs to be more than 0, because otherwise the target amount doesn't mean anything. So if it is more than 0, then in that case I don't say anything. If it is not more than 0, then you must say target amounts must be positive. So kind of same thing here. And actually, let me change this require message, because the validation message will appear when there is an amount which is negative or null or equal to 0. But the require message is more about you must specify a target amount, because that's two different cases, right? Like if you just click on continue without any value, then you must specify a target amount. Otherwise, if you put -1, then you can say target amount must be positive. But if you put something like 1,500, then that should be okay. So that's the validation done. Pretty simple. You can see floating point field here. That's step 2 done. I'm going to take this one here. So step 3, we're going to put everything inside of a section layout. So that will be an actual, the reason will be for validations within for the different dates, because that will be the two different dates. So I'm going to remove this local variables. I don't need this. I'm just going to put this here in. So I'm going to replace everything with just curly brackets, just empty curly brackets here. And that will be step 3 that we want to have. So I'm going to call a section layout here. That's going to kind of create the whole thing. And then we're going to be able to put some contents in there, and the contents will be a side-by-side layout. So side-by-side layout, because we want to have the dates. If I show you again what we have here, we want to have the dates on the left and on the right here. So we're going to have 2 items. So I'm going to put side-by-side item here and just copy here. So right now we have just 2 empty items, and we're going to put the first one to be a date. And actually the second one will also be a date. And that will be the start date. And the value will be record.start date. And same thing here, we're going to have save into be start date. Cool. So already I can save, and actually the value stays here. Nice. So I'm going to kind of be lazy here and just copy paste this whole item here into the side-by-side item, just so it looks the same. I'm going to put this as an end date. And of course, I'm going to change the fields to be target date. It's not exactly end date, it's target date that we called it. In terms of naming your fields, make something that is the most obvious and the most normal for your students. That's kind of what I would say is a glib answer, but for your users, sorry, like make something that is intuitive for your users. That would be the target here. So right now, I need to look at the start date and the target date. I can save it, but then there is a problem here because we have, I could put a target date before the start date, which is not okay. So we're going to have some validation group. And also we need to make those two required because we need to have a date, and not only required, but also mapped to the validation group, which will be the continue. So I'm going to do the same thing here for this one, for this first date field. So that way, if I put no value, it will still say a value is required. Nice. So let's look at here. We have the section layout, that's fine. We have the side-by-side layout, and now validations, we got two of them. Target date has to be in the future. So it cannot be in the past. And we also want to make sure that the start date cannot be on or after the target dates. And that will be not a specific validation on a specific field, but for both fields, so that we're going to use the validations at the level of the section layout. So I'm actually going to start with the target date that has to be in the future. So target date cannot be basically before or before or equal to today. So validations will be if record dot target date is before or after today, then target date must be in the future. It can be tomorrow, but it can't be today or in the past. And if that's not the case, then we just don't put anything. So here we see that we have an issue because we put January 8th. So if we put here at 27, then that's going to be fine. But we can still put a start date after the target date, which is not okay. We want to change that. So we're going to do a validation at the level of the section layout. So if I simplify things here, we see the section layout here just has contents. And then I'm going to put a validations because we can actually show validations at a level of the section layout. So here we're going to have to maybe tweak a couple of things. Let me actually just make sure that I reset the values here. So I'm going to clear the values and clear them here. Actually, I'm going to test the whole. Let me reload just the interface just so that we kind of get rid of all the required data cache that's been cached in. So I'm going to just go back into the dates here. And now we have an issue because we have a for each floating point field cannot compare. So here we have an issue with a comparison, which is a great example. So I'm going to actually go back into the floating point. And essentially here what we have is that we cannot compare operands of type null and type number. So this is the problem here. We have a target amount that does not like to be compared to just a zero. So I'm going to try to kind of make sure that it actually is considered as a decimal. So I'm going to do a .0. We'll see if that works. It might not work, in which case we'll need to actually do some magic in here. Yes, it doesn't work. So we need to have potentially a default value that is shown here. So I'm going to try actually to do that. Default value. And I'm going to put something like this. Cool. So that kind of removes the error. And if we put something like this, continue. Now we have another issue, but that's on step 3, which is okay. So here, just to explain what I've done here is I've wrapped my RIBang record target amount into a default value to make sure that I don't get an error, because comparisons in Appian, Appian doesn't like when you're comparing something to something that is of another type. So you're going to get this red error message because when you start, the target amount is empty, it's null. So it actually is trying to compare something that is not the right type. You could also have use a cast to a decimal value, but here this is fine. We can have a default value just for the sake of the demonstration. So now going back to my step 3 here. So what we have here is cannot compare incompatible operands of type null and type date with time zone. So same thing here. We're getting an issue, and what I can do is basically just have a default value where I could say that the default value by default for the comparison is today plus 1, which makes it so that it's always going to, by default, if you don't have a value in the target dates, this validation is skipped essentially. So that's okay. And if we put the target date here, put it in the past, then I'm going to have an issue. So you do have to sometimes tweak a bit of those, types of data, which is, I guess, okay. So going back into my validation here, so I'm going to uncomment this validations here. What I want to make sure of is that we have an if. So we could go, let me go through kind of the basic approach that we could take. We're going to say if the start date is on or after the target dates, then that's a problem. So we're going to do record fields, so we're saying the start dates cannot be on or after the target dates. So you're going to say start dates must be before target dates. So that's going to be the message that we display as a validation. Fair enough, but here we have as well an issue because there is, this error here. So a couple of different approaches we could get. We don't want to run this validation if there is no value or if one of is empty, right? So one thing we could do is I'm just going to wrap everything in another if. So it's not the most elegant thing, but that works for intents and purposes. So I'm going to actually wrap my if into another if. And basically the logic would be if there is a missing value, so only validate this if the target date and the start date are not null, essentially. So I can do something like this. So I want to make sure that both of my values, so record field start dates, and don't worry, I'm going to refactor this to make it look better. Target dates. So let me actually do something here, and we're gonna, so is not null or empty. There we go. Just refactor this. So what we're saying here is if both are not null, so if they do have value, you could also do this with an or in the opposite to say like, don't evaluate if one, or more is null. If that's the case, so here, if the values if there is both values, we can then evaluate the validation. Otherwise, just return nothing. And here we remove the error message. And basically what I can do is if I can try to put the start date in the future, then I'm going to get this message here. Start date must be before target date. So that kind of works for us here. And so, we can't really just continue because the target date needs to be in the future. So, that's fair enough. And I can also put something where I put the validation group at the level of the section layout to make sure that also this validation for the start date being before the target dates also applies when I click on continue. That's, pretty straightforward here, because the validation group will not work if it's not inside of the component that does the validations. So in the target date, this one here, this is the date field that holds the validation. So that's why it has the validation group continue. Here, this is a section layout, which is doing the validation. And why we're using a section layout is because we just want to have this message be for both things. Now, you could play with not necessarily just validations, like hard validations, like stopping validations, with more warning messages. So instead of having this validation message, maybe more like a card layout that says, hey, be careful, start date is before target date. That's going to depend on the user experience. Potentially, you want to make sure that users are blocked from entering wrong data. Potentially, you just want to warn them and make sure that they're adults and they can actually go back and fix it. So that's more up to you in terms of user experience. Cool, so let me go back here. We've got the start date, target date validations, that's fine. Target date has to be in the future, and the start date cannot be on or after the target dates. That's okay, step 3. Cool. So now we have the balance, so do we already have value? And that's gonna be pretty much the same thing that we've done with the target amount, but just this time we're gonna have another validation that we're gonna have to do. So, because I'm kind of lazy, I'm just gonna copy the whole floating point field that we have for step 2 and put this in the step 4. So step 4, I'm gonna remove this rich text display field and then just put the floating point field. So this will be called balance. Now let me just make sure that I can test it on here. Target dates must be in the future. I'm gonna put this here. Continue, so that's fine. So balance here, it's showing me the actual target amount, which is because we've just copy pasted it, but we're gonna change it to be balance. So we're gonna change it into the value and the save into here. And so the balance here, what we're going to have is, the ability to say, well, maybe I've got, $500 already saved. Of course, you can't just put something negative. So I already have this here -1, but I need to also change this here in the balance. So in my validations, target amount must be positive. I want to change the validation name to be balance must be positive, and require message or say must specify a balance. Cool. So if I can continue here, I'm blocked. That's fine. Now I want to do another thing as well. I don't want to be able to put a balance which is beyond the value of my target amount. So I actually have a second validation here. So the way you're going to do it is in validations, I'm going to collapse this whole if here, and I'm basically going to wrap it with a list. So essentially I'm doing a list of validations. So we're going to have one validation which will evaluate if the balance is negative or, below 0, so it has to be positive. Another thing that I want to do is to make sure that the balance is less than the target amount, is less, just strictly less, because we don't want the target amount to be, the balance to be exactly the target amount. So I'm going to put something like this here. So rbang record dot target date dot balance. So if it is less than the target amount, then that's okay. Otherwise, balance must be less than the target amount. Now, maybe verify if it doesn't break. If I click away, that's fine. You must specify a balance. That's okay. And then if I put something like 2000, balance must be less than the target amount. And I shouldn't be able to click on continue. Yes, that's okay. Cool. So if I put something like I've already saved $200, that should be fine. Cool. Continue. Now I've got an issue here because my initial pattern was only made for 4 steps. And so if we look at my list here, I've got step 1 corresponding to this thing here, step 2 corresponding to this thing here, step 3 with this list here, step 4, but then I have nothing else. And so what it's saying here is you're trying to go to step 5, but there's nothing that works, that we have no interface to display. So we're going to just have to kind of create it for them. So step 5, and then just put some curly brackets, which is okay. So now this disappears, but now we have nothing in the confirmation. So we're going to have to do a couple of things here to actually set this up. So let me just take this step 4 here. Now step 5, this is where we have a couple of things to define. We're going to either be able to use rich text display fields or read-only fields to display the confirmation of the values. So if I show you what we have in the actual example, so do already made saved confirmation. So we've got the name, we've got the target amount, we've got the balance, start date, target date, amount to save per day, progress. So that's pretty cool, right? This is more kind of bonus information. We're going to start with the first 2 columns. So we're going to have a section layout or potentially just directly columns layouts. Both work. And then we're going to have this be the 3rd column. But we're going to start with just the first column here. So let me bring in columns layouts. I'm going to put 2 columns here. And so the first column will have a bunch of different rich text display field. And actually, let me see if I can actually drag and drop this directly into the design mode. Maybe this will save some time. But I think because we're inside of a for each, we cannot leverage the drag and drop. That's normal. So this is the reason we can't use drag and drop here, is because we're inside of the for each. So the for each is evaluating at runtime, what we say at runtime. So that means that there is no sure way to know if there will be the columns layout here, because it's not fixed, right? The for each depends on data that's been passed on. We don't know if the data will be stable. So we're going to have to just create it ourselves here, which is okay. Rich text display field, and essentially I'm going to have 3 items here. First of all, a rich text item, which will be the label of our data. And then we're going to be able to actually have the value here. Now this is one way to do it. I actually want to also show you another way to do it, which is through the side-by-side layout, which could also be interesting for you. And the good thing is that we'll be able to actually replicate this side-by-side layout a couple of different times. And that will be, it basically is better for the alignment of those rich text display fields. So the way that you see it here with the name and almost like there is a little column here, that's going to be done by side-by-side layouts. So we're actually going to show that. So I'm going to remove the contents here and I'm going to try to get side-by-side layouts. And we're going to create one of them, and then we'll be able to actually replicate them and actually change the values. If you want to make to be best practice, you'd probably want to do this in like an expression rule or an interface to be able to call it different times. But here, just for the sake of the example, we're not going to do that. And so here, my first item will be the label of the value. So value, rich text item, text will be, so this will be the name. And that should already start to display here. So name, and I want to make sure that it's strong. That's cool. So now what I want to do is also in this other item, I want to replicate this to be a rich text display field. But here I don't want to have the text as name. I want to have the text as dynamic. So it's not every bang item. It's going to be our bang record fields name. And I don't want it to be strong. I just want it to be normal. But here we've got a kind of an issue here because the name is, we want it to be kind of on the side here. So what we'll do is actually change on the first one, on the first rich text display field, we want to say that it needs to align to the right. And there we go. We get something that is a bit more like what we have in the example interface. So now we're going to have to go for target amount and then balance. So basically, as I said, I'm going to just replicate this and copy this thing here twice. So we have 3 side-by-side layouts. And if I comment them out, so this will be the name, this will be the target, and this will be the balance. Cool. So let's go into here. We're going to say that this is the target amount, and we're going to change the name to be target amounts, and then we're going to have a $value, a function wrap around so that we actually have the ability to display this. So it's a bit cramped right now, but we'll be able to change that in a bit. So let me just do the balance first, so that way we can have something that looks like something. So now we'll change the balance here to 200, and I'm actually going to wrap this with a $. Function. That way I can see the $. Cool. So if we look here at what we have the start date and the target date. We're going to do the same thing here to display. So I can just essentially copy paste this first side-by-side layout and then just make sure that I'm at the right column layout. And we're going to copy paste this twice. So this will not be the name, but will be the start date. And then this will be goal.start date. So we want to actually say, hey, let's get the start date display. So that's fine. And then this will be the end date or target date, I suppose. Fields, target dates. Cool. So that works. So that's our main kind of data points confirmed. So that's cool. And now we might want to say, hey, let's maybe calculate the amount to save per day and show the progress that we've done here on this saving. So far, what you have is a progress. So that is the challenge that you have to do. Here, basically, you can actually use the goals overview page that we've had, around being able to actually create and calculate show the progress here. And we also want to probably show the amount to save per day. So we're going to do another columns layout here at the top page. So column layouts, and we're going to put the contents here. So 2 things, we're going to have a side-by-side. So I'm going to still just use that side-by-side layout to display. and that will be the amount to save per day. All right, so this is going to be called amount to save per day. That will be the kind of the target here. And the value, what we have to have is, I've put the equation here, so target amount minus balance / target date minus start date. So this is assuming that we have data for all of them, and that should be the case because we have all the data being validated above, right? So that should be, you know, pretty straightforward. So let me just put the fraction here, very simple. So we have the target amount minus the balance. Oop. I think my zooming in here doesn't help. And then we're going to have the target date minus the start date. So here, this is saying that this is not like init because it's basically, you know, getting an interval, which is, you know, doesn't really understand. So I'm going to put this as like $1 around it. Now let's see. And now we have amount to save per day, 1398. So that's looking pretty good. Now, I do want to talk about the cramped situation here. We just need to actually add and change the width of the column. So here in the pattern, what we had was an actual specific column that was, you know, provided to us. And essentially it's a column that holds all of those values here. So in the contents. So I'm going to actually make sure that the width can be dynamic. So it's not this one. Step 5, I need to go back up. So this should be the one here. Content section layout. Let's see, with medium. There we go. So we want to do probably something like medium plus. There we go. Maybe even wider, I would say. Yeah, we have some space here, so that's fine. Cool. And so now what I can do is actually look for the progress bar because I want to be able to put the progress bar here. So I'm going to try to use and open up the, I think it is the goals overview here. Yeah. So best practice here would be to actually store the progress bar as an expression and make it, you know, work agnostically to where it is used. So kind of make it as a reusable content components. But here we're going to be actually just copying and pasting, which is not best practice. But, you know, just for the sake of time, don't want to make this video too long. So we're going to be able to put this here. So this is the side-by-side layout. We're going to actually put here the local variables. Now it doesn't like it because it doesn't know what a FVBang item is, or at least it's not in the right context. So I'm going to just rename this to be record, and this as well here to be record. Same thing here. Essentially, any kind of mention of FVBang item, you want to change it to be record. There we go. And so now I can actually change and add a label because we didn't have one for the progress bar, but I'm going to actually name this here to be progress. Cool. So now we have our interface. So that's working, continue, and then we can click submit, and that would submit the interface. So I'm going to save the changes here. And now what we have to make sure of is that it is actually mapped into our goals overview interface. So I'm actually going to reopen it because I want to make sure that it actually is, there is a button here on the right where I can actually click on new goal. So the way I'll do it is actually I'm going to add a side-by-side layout below inside of the section layout. And essentially I'll put the rich text that we have here as a key here. So I'm going to put the rich text inside of the side-by-side layout, and then I'm going to call a record action on the right of this side-by-side. So it's a bit finicky. You got to be careful about this here. Record action field, and then I can actually just do everything from the design mode where I'll be adding an action. So looking at the action here, I'm going to select, so this is the goal that we're trying to have an action for. Select an action, new goal. And I just need to make sure that I have it's aligned to the right, to the end, so that it actually makes it look a bit better here. Cool. So now if I go into my list of objects, if I go into the personal finance landing page and I open this up, I should be able to have, I'm going to put this as a desktop view. I should be able to see in the preview here, just to make it look good, I have a new goal and my interface should appear here. So laptop, target amounts, 1,500, dates, let's say I started in December and I want to save up until March. Now we have, see, it's good to actually test it because sometimes you get those issues. So floating point field here cannot compare incompatible operands of type null and type number decimal. So we have also another issue here. So it's always good to actually test it in real life. So that should be in the balance, I believe. Why is this? Is this an issue? I think it's because it's in one of our validations. So there we go. So this is when we're comparing the validation, the balance versus the target amount. Sometimes we have no value in our balance because we don't start it. So here, what we have to do is put a default value around the balance. So make sure that we remove this issue here. I'm going to save the changes, go back to my, so I do need to just kick it off again, the action to make sure that the changes have been saved and applied. So target amount 1,500, started here and then did something here in March. Balance is 200, so we don't have the issue here. And now we have confirmation, target amount, balance, start date, target date, amount to save per day, progress. So apparently I'm late here on the saving. Submit. And now if we actually test it, we have the goal here. So we could make it so that it's actually auto refreshing. Right now we don't have it as a goals to make it auto refreshing, but you can just basically tweak how the data is being passed on into the goals interface. So essentially at the query level, you can wrap everything around a refresh variable to make sure that when you click on a new goal, it actually gets refreshed directly because it's a record action. So let's actually show this. So here, if I go into my goals overview page, I go into expression mode, and I just need to wrap my goals data into a refresh variable. I'm going to remove this here. So just going to cut this here to make sure that I have the values here. So refresh variable, I'm going to say refresh after record action. So that will mean that anytime that I refresh, that I have a record action, triggered, this will refresh the data for the goals. So if I go ahead and test it back again, so that's not this one here, this is the one. So we have the laptop here. If I put, I'm going to actually refresh here, just the interface, just for the sake of it. All right, so new goal. Let's say I'm saving for a new bed, let's say, or a TV. Let's do a TV here. So it's going to be a pretty expensive TV, 2,000. Started in November. I want to have it done by April. Continue, balance, I have 300 saved. Confirmation, that's okay, continue, submit. And now, as you see, because I have put the refresh variable on, the TV is appearing. So that's it. That's the create a new goal form layouts with using a pattern. So again, I want to make sure that you understand how to use those patterns. So make sure that you practice as much as possible using those patterns. It did save us a lot of time of setup and also a lot of inspiration. Sometimes you don't know how to set up your interfaces. So that's a good way to do it. All right. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.